And welcome back to the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit on why and when and where are we leaking women from the water career pipeline, how we can stop losing women from the industry, and how do we get them back if they have left. And right now, we've had people from a wide range of types of organizations, generational differences, all, many different areas of intersectionality, of ways of talking about water. And I'm very excited to have our next guest today, because this is someone that I actually got to know online through her LinkedIn posts. She does a tremendous job that we're going to talk about during Black History Month through an organization that she created called the Green Obsidian. Sierra Taliaferro, thank you so much for being here. Say hello, and yeah, we're so glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Tell us about, usually, we are talking about our life path and career, and you're here on the front of, the earlier part of your career, of course, going through school and then starting your first jobs, as well as starting your nonprofit. So tell us a little bit about, where you're from, how you got into working in the environment and water, and what you've done so far.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I always get that question, and I tell people my trajectory of life was so nonlinear. I actually started as a theater major. I wasn't supposed to go into science, but it was the exposure that I got in when I was in high school. And a major shout out to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, because that's where I'm originally from, where I'm from the land of the Great Lakes, where I was really exposed to a lot of those opportunities during my high school years. And in particular, it was my environmental ecosystems class in science or in high school, where I really learned the fundamentals of what it means to appreciate nature and all the elements that come with it. And that really has shaped the trajectory of my life since then, moving on. So I completely shifted from going into theater major to going more towards the science, right, for environmental science. And so I went to Bethune-Cookman University. It's a historical Black college in Daytona Beach, Florida, where I studied integrated environmental science through their program, where we learned a variety of different methods when it comes to science and engaging community, and also just how to find solutions when it comes to ecosystem problems, coordinating it with more of community. And so from there, after I graduated, I came back home and got right invested in the community that I was from. So I went through nonprofits, through government, through private entities. And then after a while, I transitioned down here to Florida. And that's kind of what I've been doing since.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite already. One of the things that we've been talking about throughout this summit is how women have nonlinear lives. And we're in these very linear, we talk about the pipeline, right? And it's it's this expectation that we follow a certain path. And so often we don't, and as human beings in general, I think there's more recognition of the need to have a nonlinear career path and to try things out. And we're certainly not going to be going to work right out of college and getting the gold watch 50 years later, right? That just doesn't happen. It was interesting that you mentioned having been a theater major, because now, here we are talking about Women in Water online. We are, all of our conferences during COVID were online. There is an element of understanding theater and connection. Like, how do you connect with an audience, whether you're talking at an outreach meeting or whether you're on a stage?
Yeah,
in the theater.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. I think when it comes to theater, and knowing that even though that's a good chunk of my background, and knowing that I do love science the way that I do now, I still use theater in a variety of different aspects, such as the ones that you've mentioned, where that might be facilitating a meeting with community groups versus NGOs or other entities in the city, or also public speaking in general when it comes to volunteer groups. So there's all these different ways that my theater skills still come into play, even though I may not have necessarily gone down that route, that they still come up in so many different ways that I still use it in my career path.
Yeah. And even talking about how we do the summit, you saw my intro, it's getting people's attention. It's really engaging with the audience. And by the way, for those of you out there, go ahead and type in the chat. Tell us where you're from. Tell us what your background was. Have any of you done theater before? Does it help you in your work? This is very different from a lot of conferences where people, especially people who don't like public speaking, they might put in an abstract just so that their company will pay for them to go to the conference, and they run around and they're catching up with old friends or learning new things, or going to receptions and everything, and then their talk comes up and they just kind of mumble through it like I got to get through this thing so I can go back to doing the rest of the conference. Right? Theater is part of how we deliver what we're doing. We're doing important stuff, and we need to know how to present it in a way that really captures people's attention.
Yeah, and connect with people.
Yes. And tell us about your Green Obsidian project. How did that happen? How did it start?
Yeah, absolutely. So how the Green Obsidian came to be, it actually started not as the Green Obsidian. During my time in Milwaukee, I just really got to a point where I was understanding that there wasn't enough representation, not just in the workforce, but just also in social media, in published work as well. And I was really getting to a point where I was just kind of frustrated with it. Like I was kind of matriculating through the next step to my career, and I wanted to figure out what I could do. But I couldn't find necessarily the resources available out there in the open, but I know that there are people out there. And so it really started from a place of frustration and fury, and it turned into something that I was really passionate about. And so it started with a Google search. That's what I like to say. It starts with a Google search, where I just started to figure, well, if people aren't going to highlight, if there are going to be these organizations and books that weren't going to publish the people who look like me, who I know do good work out here, I'm going to do something about it. So that's how I started. I just started searching for people, and I came up with quite a bit of people, and I just started to write about them. Now, originally it started on my Facebook page, and because my Facebook is private, only really my friends get to see it. So especially once they share it within their networks. But it really was the start of Black History Month. So I just kind of started to write about somebody every single day. And it's kind of been going on since then. Around year 3 is when I started to transition it to LinkedIn. And that's when it really gave more buzz, because then I was able to tag a lot of those people and those individuals that I was writing about, and they share with their networks and so on and so forth. And so just like last year, it was more of like an idea to maybe we should make this more of a public platform, because again, I started it on my Facebook page, and my Facebook page is private and they can't really see it. And so that's when I decided with the Green Obsidian. And it's just really highlighting a lot of the Black professionals who work in environmental conservation. And again, highlighting them because we know that environmental conservation is so broad and it should be emphasized just that way. And so highlighting them and the work that they're doing, but also how to support that work, because these are often people who don't always get enough mainstream media that they should, like their other counterparts, and how we can support their mission so that their work is ongoing. And so hopefully that can be an inspiration to the next generation of environmental leaders.
Very cool. Very cool. And it's really, you're a fantastic storyteller, the way you craft these stories. And of course, also the fact that there has been this whole wave, particularly since George Floyd, right? And the rise of Black LinkedIn, and that I've been following so many, Leanne and this person, that person, a lot of the issues that women have been facing, especially in these some people say male populated, it still is male dominated in some cases, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when I have women that won't speak on the summit, they'll call me, they'll comment on something I posted. They might even schedule a call to like set up to say that they want to be a speaker. and they'll go on and on and on about all the experiences that they had, but then they say, no, I can't actually record it and put it out there.
Mm.
They're worried that it's going to affect their career or their marriage or something. There's still that fear, and it feels like we talked to Nicole Brown, one of the founders of the Black Water Professionals Alliance, and also founded System for Black Women, and there is a support system that I think in some ways white women don't have. There's still sort of that, got to be careful what we say, or we're not going to get work, right? Or we're going to, something bad will happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that is sometimes some of the toughest calls to make, especially with being a woman in this era, but even trying to maneuver in the professional space of when is it time to be courageous, and when is it time that we have to take a step back for our own safety. And that's unfortunate, right? We should be able to have these open conversations where it's not going to necessarily hinder our career or our professional career, but how to have these open and honest conversations that it's not going to invoke fear into people, into women in general.
Right. And especially in these careers, and you worked with a county, and now you're working with an environmental organization, just getting started there. When you're young, it's easy to kind of be passionate about what you're doing, and have your other friends with the people you work with. But as people get older and there's more at stake, maybe they have kids, they can't afford to lose a job.
Absolutely.
They're competing, working to get to a level where they can get promoted.
Yeah.
And they're not sure they're going to get it if they upset this person or that person. I think for a lot of women in this field where we have a lot of preparation, we have the degrees, we have the licenses, certifications, whatever, we have more to lose if things don't, if things go sideways.
Yes, I agree. I think society has us in this way where we're almost put on a pedestal in a sense, but one small hiccup and it's lights out for us. And that's not okay. We work just as hard as anyone else. And of course we're human. I think that's sometimes we forget that. I think sometimes the world forgets that, is that we're not super women. We are women, and we are human on top of that we can't do it all. And that it also it really shouldn't have all of that at stake for us, so that we have one small mistake and it's the end of us. And that's not okay.
Right. I'm really glad you're here with light on flaxen conservation, and because I one of the things that I do with Watersheds, and I go to a lot of conferences, not as much as if I had more money, I'd probably go to even more.
I know, right? I do the same thing. I love conferences because you get to learn about not just what's going out in the world, but who's working in those areas, but also you see the lack thereof. And how do you, in not necessarily almost invest, but how do you introduce a lot of those themes or career choices to those who are looking to get into that career field or career pathway, but don't necessarily know anyone, for one, or don't necessarily have the right connections to get there. But also, if they get there, how are they going to fit in? Are they going to feel safe? So there's all those different types of elements that go into, going to conferences and learning about people and what they're doing, but also the companies and the organizations that they work for. That is just as important, because it also ties into retention, because it's one thing to get people there, but can you keep them is the other. Absolutely.
And, and this is, I kind of say, well, the organizations talk about retention. For the individual, it's about development. Am I getting opportunities? When we're working in these professions, it's the old guild structure, right? You only learn so much in school. That's book learning. To actually become a leader in the professions, you have your apprentice years and you're kind of doing the low level tasks and the scut work and the, oh, go do
Yeah.
this, go that, do that. But doing it in an environment where you're able to work with others, which I guess when you started, a lot of that was online. So we can talk about that as well.
Yeah.
And then you've got your journeyman years where you're kind of middle management and you're running out to the sites and you're doing a lot of the, the hands-on stuff off site, before walking the tables, becoming a master, right? It's
Yeah.
that old guild structure. And if you don't get the opportunities to travel as a journeyman, if you don't get the opportunities to try different types of projects, early in your career, you're not going to be prepared to get into leadership.
Yeah, it's not equitable. It's not equitable.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's absolutely right. We need to keep doing that. And one areas where that I've seen and going to a lot of conferences, I kind of pick out trends and just, see what's happening over the years.
Yeah. Yeah.
In addition to water and wastewater utilities and some of the stuff on Capitol Hill and everything, I had a chance to go back to River Rally, which is all of the watershed groups.
Yeah.
And I've been to River Rally at least a couple of times before.
Oh, that's awesome. I've only ever heard about River Rally and I only hear all the good stuff that comes out of it. So you're one step up above me.
Yeah, so I remember when they started because, we had something similar at the state level in Colorado, was that all of these watershed groups were forming, and in some cases it might be around habitat, in some places it might be around recreation, some places it might be around agricultural lifestyle, but whatever it was, they had similar organizational needs and similar need to keep up with what's going on and everything. And so they started having an organization, like an annual meeting, an assembly, Colorado Watershed Assembly. And it was about that time there was also this new river network, which was a national get together.
Yeah.
And when together, it's not your professional conference like at, AWWA, ACE, or WEFTEC or something, and everybody shoots and everything. It is a lot of people like to get outdoors. It is a lot of people like to have fun.
It's not the traditional setup that like usual conferences are. It's like right in the field of what we like to do, which is being outside, interacting with nature, interacting with the watershed, with water in general. So totally.
Yeah. Up in the classroom as well. It's just they might have a few more Birkenstocks or something.
Yeah.
Or they might have a sing-along or something like that at one of the evening events. But it was for a long time that these watershed groups were primarily dominated by sort of the wild and scenic rivers crowd. Right. And the preserving our wildlife areas and our summer home areas and, not wanting, the Kennedys not wanting, offshore wind, so it wouldn't disturb the view from, whatever, and suddenly this latest river rally, post-COVID, post-George Floyd, it was completely flipped. I mean, it used to be you didn't hear very much about urban watersheds at all. Right? And in fact, when you posted about the river keepers, I posted about you said, hey, are you going to do something on the one black Fred Tubman?
Yes.
Right, the black river keeper.
Yes.
But a lot of the urban watershed issues were just not being addressed. And suddenly at this year's last year now, 2022 River Rally, it was a lot of discussions about urban watersheds, a lot of panels talking about equity.
I love that. That's so important. Yeah. That is so important. And I say that because I'm involved with Milwaukee Riverkeeper back home. And even though I'm in Florida, I still stay engaged with Milwaukee. And Milwaukee Riverkeeper, shout out to them. They're just an amazing group of people who are really trying to, again, bring more awareness about urban watersheds. And that's how, because that's how you get people involved. And then that's where community is. It's within the urban environment. So they really do their best. And there's always room for improvement of how we can continue to improve that program to bring people together to not just understand how the watershed works and our, our body of water that we're connected to, not just the Milwaukee River, but all three rivers that connect in the confluence in downtown Milwaukee, and that also connect to our larger body of water, which is Lake Michigan. And so it's so much deeper than just cleaning up the watersheds and talking about it. It's asking the questions of, how do people connect to the water? That's where you have to start. How do people identify with the water? Because there's a lot of disconnect as well, especially when we think of communities and redlining and how that has impacted people's relationships with water. So, and also the ancestral lands as well, and how people, so there's a lot of that. And so they really do a good job with trying to connect all those things and bringing it to more on like a large scale platform to really hound in on why urban matters just as much.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wait, as you're doing these profile of these Black leaders in conservation, environmental movement work, are you connecting with them? Do you ever actually get to talk to them? Do you know, what do you notice as the trends? Is it mostly people working on state parks and, you know, wild and scenic rivers? Is it a mix? Are they bringing in different cultures into the discussion of watersheds and the people in them?
Yeah, it's usually a mix of all of that. And a lot of those people that I highlight, some of them I do get to talk to, some of them I know, and some of them I have met in other spaces or have worked with them in some capacity. And there's also a good chunk of people who I just follow their work, or I've been seeing their work or their name pop up from time to time. So I definitely connect with them. That's the whole goal, is to build this network of people who are doing really good work, and how do I further support it? I may not be able to support everything, but the most that I can do is share it with someone who can.
Yeah. And you know, we talked a little bit before we started recording, and I don't think you explored it as much as, you know, I've happened to have looked into some of the issues that have come up with some of the big, you know, the big green, the big nonprofit organizations. That some of the issues that were coming up around unionizing the young, you know, usually young, usually under, you know, less paid, usually more diverse people doing the work done lower levels. And, you know, were they, you know, if it's like, oh, we're a nonprofit, you know, we're a multi-gazillion dollar nonprofit, but you know, you should settle for less money and little. I mean, what are you seeing? And, you know, are you connected with a lot of other young folks who are getting into the nonprofit world, and what are you hearing there?
Yeah, I definitely hear a lot of more kind of what you alluded to is, how is this work being equitable? Because like doing a lot of that kind of work takes a lot of effort and energy. It's energy exerting. There's a lot of emotion into it too. And so to be paid fairly, especially with organizations or groups that, you know, have a substantial amount, to be able to pay them a livable wage is important, because it's inflation. But I definitely hear a lot of the more exhaustion into it. And when I think about that kind of work, I think of radical rest. And especially when we think about doing work in conservation and working with communities and getting them invested in a lot of these environmental conservation issues and topics, you know, it's time consuming and it's a lot of work. You know, it's about investing that time in. And I remember reading one of the highlights that I have. She talks about radical rest, and I couldn't have agreed with that more, because oftentimes even I have found myself being exhausted and giving so much exerted energy that I don't have enough for myself. And I think we forget about that. We forget about the self-care in the midst of all that. And as organizations, as green organizations, we have to do better. We have to do better with not just allocating more self-care time into that practice for staff, but also understand if they're not doing it with you, then we shouldn't be doing it just as hard.
And, you know, especially with so much emphasis now on ensuring that we are addressing underserved communities.
Absolutely.
And, you know, there's $1 trillion in infrastructure, and that 40% is supposed to go to underserved communities, however that's defined. And it does include a lot of historically Black communities and other historic, you know, communities of color. how has that been in terms a part of what you're doing now? And what are you planning to do with your career in addition to Green Obsidian? Take us on that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it all the time of what is every year once the Green Obsidian is done for February at least. People often think that, once February is over, then I'm done. And I'm like, no, that's like the complete opposite. Like I do, if anything, that's when the real work begins. It's keeping your eyes and ears out for individuals who you want to highlight for next year and connecting with them and just learning about their story, how to get connected to their work. That's where the real work is, because I do it from a very authentic and intentional place. And I think that's what a lot of organizations should really consider. Especially when we have organizations who always use February as like this clout entity to like say that they're so with the movement, but then when the minute Black History is over, it's like complete opposite. They didn't understand anything, and that's beside the point. Like if you really care about being equitable and diverse and emphasizing inclusion, then you just shouldn't use February or Black History Month as your only platform, because Black history is every year. It's all year round. It's not just in February, it's all year. And there's amazing people who do outstanding work in conservation every single day of the year. So take that opportunity to support them and see how their work maybe even matches with some of your own initiatives as an organization or a group entity to support them outside of Black History Month, outside of Juneteenth, like all of those things, all of that authentic effort matters.
I mean, those holidays do help elevate things that otherwise aren't talked about. I mean, one of the reasons why we were doing this summit at the time we're doing, and it happens that the day that we are recording this individual video is International Women's Day on March 8th. Happy International Women's Day.
Yes, shout out to us.
And coming out during the week of the 20th of March that's when World Water Day is. That's when UN Water, the first UN Water in a very long time. We have another person, Marshall Brewster, I interviewed, gave us the whole history of that. But they haven't had a UN Water in many, many years. So this is a big freaking deal.
Big deal
that we had that much focus on it, to be able to say, let's have a real conversation about women and water, and not just some study that some sociologists who work for a big organization, put together a bunch of, fancy sounding words, and they print out a report, and then they always come back to the same darn recommendations of let's just get more young people into the pipeline, and let's just teach, fix women and teach them to be, more confident and better communicators, and send them off to learn how to meditate so they're not so angry, and if we give them some lactation rooms and childcare on site, then that just takes care of everything. And so we have to take advantage of those peak moments when it's like in the drought, and when people are working. I'm a planner, right, water planner. So when you're working in drought, what you do is you write up do all your studies, write up the perfect water drought plan, and you stick it in a drawer, and you wait until the next drought comes around and says, people are like, I happen to have a flavor. You have to do the work ahead of time. Yes. And you have to have, what is that next step? And we were actually talking about that today. What is the next step for after the summit? We could get hundreds, thousands, it's free. It's people all over the world are hopefully going to be joining us all this week and next week, during the 2 weeks that we're releasing the summit. And what is the next step? We've got Water Week is coming in April in Washington, D.C. Do people want to think about, how can we elevate these issues there? American Waterworks Association is meeting in June. Do we elevate the issues there? How do we make sure that these things don't become just
lost in conversation?
For the holiday, let's put all the decorations away.
Yep. You're absolutely right. How do we continue that conversation around water How do we continue that conversation about inclusion and women in water and getting into these types of careers so that it doesn't get lost? It doesn't get lost on deaf ears, if I should say, and consistently staying engaged, with diverse groups, not just like the young folks, but also the older folks as well. So just being mindful of intergenerational connections as well.
Yeah, one of the things we've talked about a lot throughout the summit has been um, recognizing that women may be coming in and out of the water sector at many different places.
Mm-hmm.
And, there may be times that they need to step out for kids, for health reasons, for elder care, for whatever, or because they're working in a place where they can't advance and they have to, take a lateral or even step back. And may even be working for someone younger than them. And so often with reverse mentoring, it's like, I'm the older mentor, but I still have something, to learn from you young people. But you could end up not being my boss,
That's
right?
right. Yeah,
So how do
absolutely.
we make sure that people are thinking mentorship is not just let's reach the next generation, the next generation, the next generation, when we have now 5 generations in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. That have a variety of different skill sets, and and I think that's and that starts with culture within the workspace too, is how to include everyone there to make them feel seen and heard, but also understanding that it's a safe space too, that it's a safe space for learning and to grow as not just individuals, but as a team and collectively. And of course, because we have such a diverse group of people who have a variety of different skill sets, years of experience, sometimes you may get a person that is younger than you that might be your supervisor. How do you grow out of that? Having those open conversations. And so I'm try to be a big communicator, because that is the foundation for me, I feel like. So being able to like express my concerns, or just having open dialogue about and being vulnerable at that, like being vulnerable and knowing that there might be someone that's younger than me that might be my supervisor or my boss. Am I okay with that? And why not? It's about asking those deeper questions. Why, if it bugs you, why does this bug you? Because they give a lot more insight and opportunity for you to grow and expand, so that maybe one day you can take their place.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who's built teams before, I used to be a rugby coach, right? And, and often
Nice.
there was always, there's so few schools that have rugby at the grade school level that we'd always have people who are brand new. So we start from the basics, we start from the beginning, and we look for, the best in everyone. And everybody gets to play. And there's an assumption that everybody has something to bring to the team, even if it's just being the best person at the party.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree. And folks, go ahead and type in the chat. Have you ever hired someone younger than you? Or sorry, older than you?
Mm-hmm.
Would you hire someone older than you? What does that feel like?
And why not? I think there's a stigma sometimes around those types of scenarios of why a supervisor needs to be older than you. Sometimes that person that has really good skill sets and experience might be someone younger. What would the team dynamic be? But also from the other end, like how as a team do you work through that dynamic as well?
Yeah. You mentioned also that you went to an HBCU.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Were there opportunities? I know there's a lot. There's been a lot in the water space lately of developing programs to try to get more diversity.
Yeah.
And or to hand out scholarships or whatever, and try to get more people to show up at the conferences and whatnot. And inevitably it becomes around, let's reach out to HBCUs or historically Hispanic universities. And like, what's the breakdown of how many Black students are at HBCUs versus predominantly white, what is it, PWIs, predominantly white
PWIs,
institutions,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think Well, I'll only speak from my experience. As just as far as being an alum of an HBCU, Bethune-Cookman University in particular, I think as I look back on it now, there weren't as many opportunities back then as there are now. And I point that into divine timing. I think for me in particular, we were just kind of finding our ways around like when it was really becoming a really popular thing. And so we were trying to find our own path of where to go next, you know, as much as I loved the program. And then even after graduation, trying to find, you know, what avenue should I go into next is always the big question, because environmental conservation is so broad. Environmental science is so broad. How do you choose, you know? And so even going through the program, like I knew that that was a big thing and still wasn't unsure. But again, experience and exposure comes into play, because it wasn't until I left college where I really got the experience of what I really wanted to do, which is how I ended up where I am now, you know? So I take pride in that, but also understanding that there's divine timing for everything. Those opportunities that are out there right now, I'm glad that they're out there, because if anything, it's bringing more light, shedding more light on the fact that those opportunities weren't there before, and they should have been. Yeah. They should have been from the beginning. They should have been there from the get-go, as much as they are for PWIs, if they are there at all. I don't know for sure, but I'm going to assume so. And for HBCU, sometimes it can be a little bit more intrusive, but really we want those opportunities just as much as anybody else, and we want the experience. We're spending all of our time to try to learn about it, and also we're maneuvering through these areas where there's not too many people like us, and we want to find that community and build in that community, so long as you're inclusive and authentic and intentional about us growing as a professional within that career space.
Remind me, what year did you graduate and when did you start your career?
So I graduated from Bethune-Cookman University in spring 2014. That sounds so long ago, and it is, at least for me. And so
you were already well into your work for the county. You had been in Wisconsin and then came down to Florida, worked for the county. So when you started at the county in Florida, was that right before COVID, or how did COVID affect your
right before COVID?
Connecting?
It was right before COVID when I started with the county.
COVID hire.
Yeah, but I mean, granted though, after I graduated from Bethune-Cookman, and I came back to Milwaukee actually, and that's where I gained a good chunk of my experience is based out of Milwaukee. A lot of the associations and groups and networks that I've been working with have been specifically in Milwaukee. That was my base because that was home for me. And if anything, it helped me elevate my skill set to be able to expand what I do down here in Florida.
Right.
Yeah. And so like working in Milwaukee, I worked with the county and worked with some NGOs as well as private entities. And all that experience helped me also transition down here. I just kind of mirrored the same tactics when I transitioned down to Florida.
Yeah. Were you able to get good mentorship even during COVID? Were you able to, were there some doors that were more open because you could just set up a Zoom call, reach out to someone on LinkedIn kind of thing that, you know, we didn't used to do that as much, right?
Yeah. I think during the pandemic, it was definitely an interesting time to be, but especially as a new person who is just moved here, trying to understand how the land operates and getting more comfortable with acknowledging the land and land history. That's always the challenge that is the challenge that I accepted when moving down here. But I always take time for that first. Is if you're going to move to a new place, get to know the land history. That's very important. So if anything, a lot of that learning I did on my own. And I just, again, I reflected a lot of those skill set that I learned in Milwaukee. I just mirrored them down here. And it was really quite easy. Personally, it was very easy because I love to volunteer. That's one. And I love to get involved too. So the best advice I give to like any of my previous students or anybody, volunteer. That's how you learn so much about anything. Volunteer your time. If you have any capacity to give time to get involved in in any organizations that, you know, you kind of connect with or feel passionate about, do it. That's absolutely true. And from there, that's really how I expanded my network, was volunteering.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And so, you've been able to get out, because Florida is different. And
Yeah.
I actually,
Isn't it?
I did my, in so many ways.
In so many ways.
Out there on the side. Well, because, I actually did my master's at Chapel Hill. Did my second bachelor's at NC State, master's at Chapel Hill, and I was working for the state of North Carolina when we were developing these coastal plain management programs, the capacity use area they called it. But I looked at every single coastal plain state, all through the Atlantic coastal plain, from New Jersey all the way down to Georgia. But then Florida's got a very different natural system.
Yeah,
right?
very different.
Not to mention, hurricanes coming left and right.
And center. But what I really loved about Florida, and aside from its beaches, its food and culture, it's really the Everglades. It's this beautiful, fresh body of water that supplies majority of the water that we drink down here in the South Florida region, especially on the southern east coast. And I connected with it because it reminded me of home. It reminded me of Lake Michigan. It's just this just beautiful body of water that has so much life and so much history within it. And it gave me like this more emphasis to why I do what I do, because water connects all of us. No matter where you are, hopefully there's always going to be water, and it's an address for all of us, and it is the lifeblood of everything. And so when I think of the Everglades, I think of me, because even though I'm a transplant, it's still a part of me. I use it, and I interact with the Everglades every day. And that is part of my mission, is to like reconnect people to that thinking. Is we connect, even though I'm miles away from the Everglades to a degree. I don't interact with the Everglades every day, but I do, in a sense. It's in the water that I drink. It's what I cook with. It's how I wash my hair. It's, it's in everything. And once we start to get into that mindset, we'll start to, think of water not less as a commodity, but more as an entity.
And that's one of the things I love about this water community, and I think even when women, or Blacks or anyone have struggled in a particular career path, a lot of people don't leave altogether, and people talk about retention, in an organization, but you get a lot of women who want to somehow still stay involved, become entrepreneurs, start nonprofits. Maybe it's a temporary thing, and then they think about going back with a large organization or what have you. But it's that we're, we are a community as a whole, and we are a people of the water, right?
People of the water. Yes.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. Were there any things that you had wanted to share as part of this interview? You want to talk to the audience of just being inclusive or including Black conservation throughout the year, or just any advice you want to share?
Yeah, I think the advice that I would share is stay open to be teachable. We don't have all of the answers. I certainly don't have all of the answers, but if anything, just continue to stay open to be teachable. And even though we may not have all the answers, let's stay open-minded to find those answers together and be inclusive about it, so that it includes everyone in that conversation.
Yeah. Well, you have a lot to offer this industry, and I think you are going to find as you continue and get to conferences and get to River Rally and get to, you know, you gotta go to
One
Riverdale.
day.
I don't remember if they're San Antonio or so. I can't remember where they are next time. They were here in DC, so I was able to go, and it was just really
Yeah,
cool.
right on.
Um,
One day.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it is such a big opportunity to get out there to these conferences,
Yeah.
and so I'm glad that they're, you know, making more opportunities, and not just for the HB. It is important to reach out to the HBCUs and also to make, you know, create more opportunities that, you know, young professionals at all levels,
Yeah.
and you know,
Yeah, because we want we want the workforce to reflect the communities that we work with. And I think that's very important for people to remind themselves in.
you know, actually, I just remembered there was another question I was going to ask you about Florida.
Uh-oh,
You've
should I
had
be
some
scared?
interesting legislation lately, and I think people have, the news has reported that of primarily around CBT, or critical Black theory, but that legislation actually also gets to anything gender related, anything diversity related, right? And you know, and that's going to include women in science programs, women in engineering programs. I mean, how has that affected you? Or what is the buzz in Florida about this legislation that we're seeing that's coming up?
That's a really good question. And I think a lot of the support is around really trying to find ways to derail it. It's because we have to emphasize the importance of how diverse our community is. And in order to find solutions to a lot of the issues that we have in Florida, it needs all of us. It needs all of us and all of our diverse voices. And I think that's just one aspect that I've been hearing around or about of how they're trying to combat this issue so that it can continue to be an inclusive voice for everyone to participate in.
Well, and we certainly need that within the water space.
Yeah.
You know, whether we're dealing with community of color, whether we're dealing with, you know, any project.
Anybody.
Really. Who are the people that we are serving? It's not just about pipes and pumps.
Yeah.
It's not just about, you know, running the models. That's a part of it. But we also have to think about the community you serve. We also have to think about the stakeholders that are involved, the agencies that are involved. You know, who are we talking to? How, you know, getting back to what you were talking about with the theater, you knowing your audience and connecting with that audience, and really taking them on this journey together.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing the journey that you are on, and keep us posted. Come on into the chat. So all of our speakers are going to be able to, you know, be in the chat, communicating with y'all, responding to your questions. If they're not there live, they'll be there eventually. And for those of you who are watching, please, you know, let us know what you think. And we're so glad that you're here. Sierra, we're so glad that you're here, that you're part of this Water Summit community. And thank you again.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks so much for joining us for this extraordinary conversation, one of 45 extraordinary conversations we had as part of the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where we explored where and why women are leaking from the water career pipeline, how we can stop those leaks, and even bring women back to water. I hope that you will enjoy all of these amazing interviews. If you don't have a chance to watch all of them during the summit, you have the opportunity to join us with a power pack and get lifetime access to all the videos, as well as an opportunity to join us for 30 days in a brand new community where we will dig even deeper in live facilitated conversations about some of the issues that are facing women in water. Look forward to seeing you there. Please join us at watercitizen.org/women, watercitizen.org/women for more information. See you again soon.